You know, if I was standing at the beginning of time with the possibility of taking kind of general and panoramic view of the whole of human history up to now, and the Almighty said to me, Martin Luther King, which age would you like to live in? I would take my mental flight by Egypt. I would watch God's children in their magnificent trek from the dark dungeons of Egypt through, or rather across the Red Sea, through the wilderness on toward the Promised Land. In spite of this magnificence, I wouldn't stop there. I would move on by Greece and take my mind to Mount Olympus. I would see Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Euripides, around Mt.Vernon as they discussed the great and eternal issues of reality, but I wouldn't stop there. But even come up into the great heyday of the Roman Empire. I would see developments around there through various emperors and leaders, but I wouldn't stop there. Even come up into the day of the Renaissance. Get a quick picture of all that the Renaissance did for the cultural and aesthetic life of man, but I wouldn't stop there. But even go by the way that the man for whom I am named had his habitat. I would watch Martin Luther as he tacks his 95 Theses on the door at the Church of Wittenberg, but I wouldn't stop there. Even come up into the year 1863. I would see a vacillating president by the name of Abraham Lincoln finally come to the conclusion that he had to sign the Emancipation Proclamation, but I wouldn't stop there. Even come up into the early 30s, see a man grappling with the problems of the bankruptcy of his nation. Come with an eloquent cry that we have nothing to fear but fear itself, but I wouldn't stop there. Strangely enough, I would turn to the Almighty and say, if you allow me to live just a few years in the second half of the 20th century, then I will be happy. Now, that's a strange statement to make because the world is all messed up, the nation is sick, trouble is in the land, confusion all around. That's a strange statement. But I know somehow that only when it is dark enough can you see the stars. Now I see God working in this period of the 20th century in a way. Men in some strange way are responding. Something is happening in our world. The masses of the people are rising up. Wherever they are assembled today, whether they are in Johannesburg, South Africa, Nairobi, Kenya, Accra, Ghana, New York City, Atlanta, Georgia, Jackson, Mississippi, or even Memphis, Tennessee, the cry is always the same. We want to be free. I'm just happy that God has allowed me to live in this period to see what is unfolding. I'm happy that He's allowed me to be in Memphis. I can remember when we were in Birmingham, Alabama, in that majestic struggle there. You know, we would move out of the 16th Street Baptist Church day after day. By the hundreds we would move out. Bull Corner would tell them to send the dogs for them. They did come. But we just went before the dogs singing, ain't gonna let nobody turn me around. Next Bull Corner would say, turn the fire hoses on. As I said to you the other night, Bull Corner didn't know history. He knew a kind of physics that somehow didn't relate to the trans physics that we knew about. That was the fact that there was a certain kind of fire that no water could put out. So we went before a fire hose. We had known water. We were Baptist or some other denominations. We had been immersed. We were Methodists and some others. We had been sprinkled, but we knew water. That couldn't stop us. So we just went before the dogs and the water hoses. They would look at us. We would look at them. We would just go on singing over my head, I see freedom in the air. Every now and then we'd be thrown in the paddy wagons, and sometimes we were stacked in there like sardines in a can. They would throw us in, and old bull would say, take them all. They did, but we were just going in the paddy wagon singing, we shall overcome. Then we'd be thrown in jail, and you could see the jailers looking through the windows, being moved by our words, being moved by our prayers and our song. So there was a power there. Bull Corner couldn't adjust to. And so we ended up turning Bull into a steer, and we won our struggle in Birmingham. We got to go on in Memphis just like that. I call upon you to be with us. When we go out Monday, when we have our march, you need to be there. If it means leaving work, if it means leaving school, you need to be there. Be concerned about your brother. You may not be on strike, but either we go up together or we go down together. That is where we are today. Now about injunctions. You know, we have an injunction and we're going into court tomorrow morning to fight this illegal and unconstitutional injunction. All we say to America is to be true to what you're saying on paper. Maybe if I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest for a right. And so just as I say, we're not going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunctions turn us around. You know what's beautiful to me is to see all of these ministers of the gospel. It's a marvelous picture. Who is it that is supposed to articulate the longings and the aspirations of the people more than the preacher? Somehow the preacher must have a kind of a fire shut up in his bones. Whenever injustice is around, he must tell it. Somehow the preacher must be in Amos and say it when God speaketh, who can but prophesy. Again, with Amos, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Somehow the preacher must say with Jesus, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me. I'm always happy to see a relevant ministry. You know, several years ago I was in New York City, autographing the first book that I had written. While I was sitting there autographing books, a minute black woman came up. The only question I heard from her was, are you Martin Luther King? And I was looking down writing and I said yes. The next minute I felt something hitting on my chest. Before I knew it, I had been stabbed by this demented woman. I was rushed to Harlem Hospital. It was a dark Saturday afternoon. That blade had gone through and the x-rays revealed that the tip of the blade was on the edge of my aorta, the main artery. Once that's punctured, you're drowned in your own blood. That's the end of it. Came out of the New York Times that next morning that if I had merely sneezed, I would have died. Well, about 4 days later, they allowed me after my operation, and after my chest had been opened, the blade had been taken out to go around in the wheelchair in the hospital. They allowed me to read some of the mail that came in, and from all over the states and the world. Kind letters came in. I read a few, but one of them I will never forget. I had received a letter from the president and the vice president, but I had forgotten what those telegrams said. I received a visit and a letter from the governor of New York, but I had forgotten what that letter said. There was another letter that came from a little girl, a young girl who was a student at the White Plains High School. And I looked at that letter and I will never forget it. It said simply, Dear Dr. King, I am a 9th grade student at the White Plains High School. While it should not matter, I would like to mention that I'm a white girl. And I read in the paper of your misfortune and of your suffering, and I read that if you had merely sneezed, you would have died. So I am simply writing you to say that I am so happy that you didn't sneeze. I want to say tonight that I too am happy that I didn't sneeze. Because if I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1960. Students all over the South had started sitting in at lunch counters. Yet I knew that as they were sitting in, they were really standing up for the best in the American dream, and they were taking that whole nation back to those great wells of democracy which were dug deep by the founding fathers in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1961 when we decided to take a ride for freedom and ending segregation on interstate traffic. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1962 when Negroes in Albany, Georgia decided to straighten their backs up. Now, whenever men and women straighten their backs up, they are going somewhere because a man can't ride your back unless it is bent. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been around here in 1963. Black people of Birmingham, Alabama, aroused the conscience of this nation and brought into being the Civil Rights Bill. If I had sneezed, I would have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had. If I had sneezed, I would have been down in Selma, Alabama to see the great movement there. If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have been down in Memphis to see a community rally around the brothers and sisters who were suffering. Yes, I am so happy that I didn't sneeze. They were telling me that now it doesn't matter now. Don't know, it really doesn't matter what happens now. I left Atlanta this morning, and as we got started on the plane, there were 6 of us. The pilot said over the public address system, "We are sorry for the delay, but we have Dr. Martin Luther King on the plane." We had to be sure that all of the bags were checked and that nothing would be wrong with the plane. So we had to check out everything carefully, and we've had the plane protected and guarded all night. Then I got into Memphis. Some began to say the threats, or to talk about the threats that were out. What would happen to me from some of our sick white brothers. Well, I don't know what will happen now. Got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter to me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live long life. Longevity has its place. I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over. And I have seen the promised land. I may not get there with it. But I want you to know tonight that we as people will get to the promised land.